In the last video, we talked about how genes are stored in our chromosomes, and our chromosomes are actually the unit of inheritance. Our genes are compacted into a set of 23 unique chromosomes, and we get one from mom, one from dad, giving us 46 total. We also talked about how the same genes are always on the same location in the same chromosome. This has several important consequences. One of the biggest is that you will always have two copies of the same gene, right? Because the same gene is always in the same location in chromosome 1, and you have two copies of that chromosome. So for every gene you have two copies. Because the chromosome is a unit of inheritance, you're always going to have one copy of those genes from mom and one copy from dad. This has several interesting consequences when we try to explore how our traits are actually expressed. Understanding this expression relies heavily on the work of a 19th century monk by the name of Gregor Mendel, whose model for genetic inheritance of information is still used for a lot of genetics and biology today. He did a lot of his work on plants and formulates sort of the model we're going to explore. Mendel did a lot of his work with pea plants, and we discovered there's a variety of traits in the pea plants. Seed color, seed shape, the pod shape or color, the way the flowers were colored, or the organization of the plant as a whole. What he found is that these traits could be expressed all within the same species of pea, and that there was some pattern to the inheritance of these traits, but it wasn't obvious. Purple flowers bred with purple flowers didn't always produce purple flowers. And even the same seeds from two purple planted pea pods together would sometimes produce white or sometimes produce all purple. Mendel explored this by picking a singular trait, like, for example, the color of the flowers. He would then meticulously mate plants together until he could breed true, which meant the plants would always produce white or always produce purple flowers. He would then take the true breeding purple flowers and then take a little bit of the pollen and then mate them with the pure breeding white flowers and take a look at the results from the seeds from that mating. To understand what Mendel discovered, we have to review how he would discuss his research. So in this example, we have two traits, the purple flowers and the white flowers. Mendel would, for example, describe the gene that encoded the purple flower as a big P, and the gene that encoded the white flower as a little p. We'll talk a little bit why big P and little p, but that's how he would describe it. So remember, Mendel started with true breeding plants that would always produce purple or always produce white flowers. He would call those plants that were pure breeding purple flowers as having two purple genes, and those that would true breed white flowers as having two white genes. So the purple breeding plants were big P, and the white breeding plants were little p. So what would happen? Mendel would cross the true breeding purple with the true breeding white, and he wanted to see what the offspring would be. What Mendel discovered was that when a true breeding purple and true breeding white were mated, every single one of the offspring had purple flowers. Here's my question to you, though. Based on everything that we've talked about with how genes are inherited, what genes have to be in that generation of those cross? So pause the video if necessary and figure out what genes are in each of those purple flowers that were bred from the true breeding purple and true breeding white. All right, well, remember that you inherit one chromosome from each parent, one from the purple, one from the white. You always have two copies of the gene, but you can only get one from each parent. That means that even though all the plants are purple, they all also have to have the white gene. There's one purple and one white in each of these purple flowers. Since the purple flower was always expressed even though the white gene was present, Mendel referred to it as dominant. That's why it was the capital P. If that gene is present, that is the color the flower will be. The white flower can only emerge if no purple gene is present and both copies were white, hence the lowercase p. those traits were called recessive. In the case of a true breeding plant, such as Mendel started with, that was always purple or always white, these were homozygous or homozygotic. Homozygotic means that both genes in both chromosomes were the same. Two dominant traits or two recessive traits. In this case, two purple or two white. In the case of the purple flowers, where he bred one true breeding purple with one true breeding white, we know that there's one purple gene and one white gene. In this case, they were referred to as heterozygous. It contains one dominant, one recessive. The two genes are different, hence heterozygotic. So here's the next big question. What happens when we take two heterozygotic purple plants? We know that they have a big P and a little p, one purple gene, one white gene. And if we take two heterozygotic plants and we crossbreed those, say, and take 4 seeds and plant them, what should we expect to find? Are they going to be all purple plants, all white plants, some combination? If they're a combination, what percent should we expect to be purple and what percent should we expect to be white? Can you work it out? Pause the video and come back and let's see. One technique that can make this easier to solve is what's called a Punnett square. In a Punnett square, we're going to take a table, and in the row, we're going to put one of the flowers, and the column headers, we're going to put the other. So we have two heterozygotic flowers. They're both purple, but each one has a purple gene, and each one has a white gene. That means in any offspring, they can each contribute one gene, either purple or white. So in the first scenario, we're going to see that each one contributes a purple gene. We move over to the next cell, we'll see that the one contributes a purple, the other can contribute a white. We move over to the next cell, we'll see that one is contributing white, the other purple, and in the final cell we see 2 white genes contributed. That means that we will have, for every 4 seeds, roughly 3 of them will be purple, 1 of them will be white. About 25% will be recessive homozygotic. About 25% will be dominant homozygotic, and about 50% will be heterozygotic. However, 75% will be purple, 25% will be white. One important point to keep in mind is that even though 3 of the plants are likely to be purple, only about 30%, 1/3, are actually true breeding, have 2 purple traits. The other 66% are going to be heterozygotic, have 1 purple, 1 white. That means that there can be different genes for the same trait. Right? So 2 purple creates a purple flower, and 1 purple, 1 white also produces a purple flower. Okay? So the phenotype is the actual trait, the purple flower. The genotype is the underlying genes. So we will sometimes separate those. So keep in mind phenotype and genotype. So even though the same phenotype might be present, there can be a different genotype. There are a lot of traits we can find in people that show this sort of dominant recessive pattern. For example, can you roll your tongue like in this picture? That's a dominant trait. Are you unable to do it? That would be a recessive trait. If you take a look at earlobes, you'll find that they are either attached or detached. The detached earlobe is the dominant trait. The attached earlobe would be recessive. The widow's peak, right? That's a dominant trait. The lack of a widow's peak would be the recessive. Dimples, dominant. Lack of dimples, recessive. Long versus short eyelashes. The long eyelashes are the dominant form. If you take a look at hair on the middle digit of your fingers or toes, that's a dominant trait. Freckles, dominant trait. If you put your hands together, like you see in this picture, you may find that your pinkies lie straight against each other. That would be a dominant trait. If there's a little bend in them, that they kind of peel off in a bit of a V shape, that would be a recessive trait. Hitchhiker's thumb, recessive. Cleft chin, recessive. Curly hair, also recessive. And brown eyes tend to be dominant to blue eyes or green eyes. So remembering that brown eyes are always going to be dominant to blue eyes, take a look at this family tree. See if you can go through and at each generation label whether these people are homozygotic dominant, homozygotic recessive, or heterozygotic. All right, see if you can work out each step of the tree. Pause the video. Once you've gone through it, and I do encourage you to go through it, just try it, restart the video, and we'll take a look. Here are the answers. Since we know anybody with blue eyes has to be homozygotic recessive, we can see in the first generation that that circle with the blue eyes has to be blue-blue. The square with the brown eyes can either be homozygotic for brown or heterozygotic. Each offspring from this mating has to produce heterozygotic brown-eyed individuals. They get the one blue gene from the circle and the brown-eyed gene from the square. Because they all have brown eyes, they had to have gotten the brown-eyed gene, but they also have to get the blue gene from the circle because that's all it can provide. Right? If we go through and work out each step using similar logic, hopefully you found your answers. If you're at all confused about this would be an excellent thing to come onto the forums and ask a question about, or you can email me. So now that we have a handle on how genes are encoded and stored and inherited, we can now begin to ask the question, do they really affect our behavior or our thoughts? Right? They obviously affect our physical appearance, but what degree do they affect our psychology? We're going to pick that up in the next video.